Do you ever feel like you're running out of breath when you're singing, even though you're constantly taking breaths? Or maybe you heard that you're supposed to support your singing or breathe from your diaphragm, but nobody's ever really explained to you what that means, and now you're just hella confused when it comes to breathing and singing. Well, if that's you, welcome to part 2 of our 3-part voice lesson mini-series where I'm breaking down the most common challenges that singers are facing and how to actually fix them. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, make sure you do so right now by either clicking here or checking out the description below. And if you're new here and you're like, who is this chick? Hello, my name is Lara, and I'm going to be your vocal coach for the day. And who knows, maybe if you like what you're hearing, even beyond. You know what I find really interesting? Breathing is something I almost never talk about in a first-time voice lesson with a new-to-us student, and I have done hundreds of these lessons. I only talk about breathing if they are either, very obviously constantly running out of breath, and we need to address that, or they themselves say, I think I need to work on my breathing. And more often than not, I'm like, your breathing is actually just fine. Because, a lot of people, they hear, you have to work on your breathing. Without breath, there's no singing and blah, blah, blah. And yes, that is very much true because your voice is a wind instrument, meaning without air, there is no sound. Just like if you don't blow into your trumpet, there's no sound that's going to come out, right? Same thing for the voice. You need air. You need to breathe and exhale to actually sing. But also you have to remember, you've been breathing for however many years you've been alive. You know how to breathe. So let's not overcomplicate it. So in this video, I'm going to simplify breathing and support for you, highlight some of the most common mistakes that singers make when it comes to breathing, and finally help you gain clarity over what it actually means to sing with support. Because guess what? It is a lot simpler than what everybody else out there makes it seem to be. Let's actually get started with this. What does singing with support actually mean? Because if I hear one more vocal coach out there tell singers, support from your diaphragm or squeeze your abs for support, so help me God, because it is neither of those things. First of all, your diaphragm is an involuntary muscle, meaning you cannot control it. And also, you cannot really feel it. So even if it was possible to control your diaphragm, you have no idea what that even feels like. So how do you know if you're singing with support or not when you can't feel it? Your diaphragm, you can't control it. It's going to do its thing, whether you think about it or not, which is why you can breathe when you're sleeping or when you're in a coma. It's going to do its thing, whether you think about it or not, just like your heart, okay? And also what we need to remember too is your diaphragm is actually relaxed when you exhale. And when we sing on our exhalation, right? Not our inhalation. So that is yet another reason why supporting from your diaphragm is impossible, because you're singing on your exhalation and your diaphragm is relaxed when you exhale. It's not your diaphragm, so please, you can forget all about it. You don't need it, okay? I mean, you need it, don't get me wrong, but not for support, okay? It's also not squeezing your abs, because when you're squeezing your abs, a lot of times what happens because of the Valsalva maneuver, your throat gets really tight as well. Your vocal folds start squeezing together when you're squeezing your abs. You can hear it in my voice right now. If I'm squeezing my abs, my voice sounds completely different than when I am not squeezing my abs. And you can try this yourself as well. You'll feel that too. So please, no planking or doing crunches or doing crazy Pilates poses or anything like that, because that's just going to add strain to your voice, which, as you learned in part 1 of this series, we don't want tension and strain when we sing. Instead, what we want to do when we think about singing with support is focusing on breath flow. Literally meaning just using the correct amount of air for the notes that we are singing and exhaling steadily. That's it. Breath support or breath control literally just means you're exhalation. And our wonderful coach Bree from our amazing team has this really cool analogy, the air hockey table analogy. If you've ever been to an arcade and you've tried to play on an air hockey table, but the table was off or you haven't paid for it yet, then if you hit the puck with that little whatever thingy, whatever that's called, then the puck isn't really going very far, even if you're hitting it really hard. It's just kind of like dragging across the table. But as soon as you turn the table on or you start paying for it and the table turns on, then if you hit the puck, even just a little bit, it just starts bing, 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 flying around like crazy, right? It is the same thing for the voice. The reason why the puck isn't going very far when you're hitting it and the table is turned off is because there's too much friction, right? That puck is just dragging across the table and there's a ton of friction, so it's not really going anywhere. But when the table is on, there are tiny little holes in the table that shoot air out, and then your puck is essentially floating on that air, hence air hockey table. It is floating on that air, reducing and pretty much bringing friction down to zero. Not quite, but whatever, right? It's dramatically reducing that friction. So it's just going bing, 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 bing all over the table. It's the same thing for your voice. If there is no air or not enough air, there's so much friction and your sound can barely come out. But if we actually exhale while we sing, if we use breath support or breath control and we're focusing on flow, breath flow, then that sound is just gonna start flying out of your mouth and you don't feel like you have to force it or push it out so much. So let's look at an example. I used the Ano Mountain example in video 1, or like in part 1. Let's just use that same example. So the phrase is, if I'm not supporting it, if I'm like not really using my air, because baby, there's ain't no mountain high enough. Okay, cool. I can hit the notes, but it doesn't ring, right? Like there's no spin in my voice. It doesn't ring. It's not full. It's not resonant. It's almost like there's a filter on top of my voice. Now, if I use my breath and I'm focusing on exhaling as I am singing, then it sounds something like this. 'Cause baby, there's ain't no mountain high enough. It's a lot easier to sing that way and it sounds a lot more full, right? That is what singing with support means. Just actually using your air when you're singing and not holding it back. Now you might be like, but Laura, I already am constantly running out of breath. I ain't got more air to give. I totally hear you, and I have the best news for you. The more breath you release when you sing, the less likely you are to run out. I know, kind of weird. It's a psychological thing. Once you stop being afraid of running out of breath all the time and you actually start using your air, you will be able to go for much, much, much longer. I know it technically on paper makes no sense, but it's literally been exactly like this for every single singer I've ever worked on breathing techniques with ever. And yes, you are special, but it's not going to be different for you. I promise you that. You know where else more does not equal better? How frequently you take a breath. Here's a quick little clip of singer Eve Rose. She is in her early 50s, has never had a voice lesson before, but just loves singing and wants to feel more confident when she is singing at church together with her friends. She was singing a song, Hallelujah, and pretty quickly we realized that she was taking breaths everywhere and she was over-breathing so much and constantly running out of breath anyways. So we looked at that, decreased the amount of breaths that she took, and the result was pretty darn awesome. Let's have a listen.
When it goes like this, the fourth, the fifth, the manifold, in the major reef, the back king, composing hallelujah.
You're starting to breathe everywhere. You're adding way more breaths than what we need. The more frequently you take a breath, the more you feel like you're running out. Because there's absolutely such a thing as over breathing after the word fifth and after the word lift. That's when you can breathe. Other than that, don't.
When it goes like this, the fourth, the fifth, the manifold, and the major lift, the back of king composing hallelujah.
Yes. Okay, how was that?
Good.
That was really good. Not only did she not run out of breath when she was taking less frequent breaths, but also her tone got so much more powerful, and we didn't even work on that. And this is one of the most common mistakes I see singers make when they are singing and when they're working on their breathing. Too much and too frequent breaths. Always keep in mind the phrase that you are about to sing and inhale for that phrase. Not too much at once and not too frequently. Over breathing is definitely a thing and it is not helpful at all. Sometimes less is better. Another common mistake that I see singers make is breathing in, holding on to that air, and then start singing. Something like this. 'Cause baby, there's ain't no, rather than, 'cause baby, there's, immediately starting after I'm done taking my breath in. Holding on to your breath, holding on to your air before you start singing creates tension. And again, you already learned in part 1, tension is no bueno. It's not going to help you. It's just going to make singing that phrase a lot harder. So don't breathe in too early. Only breathe in right before the phrase so that you can get started with the phrase immediately and you don't have to hold on to your breath. Now, at the beginning of this video, I quickly touched on squeezing your abs not being support and that you shouldn't do that. And I 100% stand by that. But that also doesn't mean that you're not feeling anything in your abdominals at all. It's still quite useful to use your abs to give you almost like a little turbo boost. Coach Bree on our team, she calls it like, imagine like you're driving over a mushroom in Mario Kart. That gives you that little turbo boost to get up to that note. That's definitely very true. She coached me through that actually not too long ago. And I was like, oh my God, that makes it so easy, so much easier to hit that top note. So it's not like you shouldn't engage your abs at all, but there's a difference between squeezing your abs and engaging your abs to give you just a little bit more of that whoop, that oomph, right? That little turbo boost to get up to a certain note. So how do you know what's squeezing, what's engaging, what's too much, what's not enough? Take your hand, or one of your hands or both of your hands, put them on your stomach, and then pulse on an S, like this. Don't like actively like pull in your abs like and then like try and make that movement as big as possible. Just and see what you're feeling in your abs. That is the kind of engagement that we are looking for when we're singing. If we're forcing it, that's already too much, right? Now you're already getting into squeezing territory, but just and then sustaining that and not like, right? But because if I'm then continuously engaging my core that way, I can have that steady breath release, okay? But playing around with that pulsing S is gonna help you find that perfect in between of too much and not enough engagement in your core. One more thing I wanna talk about around breathing. It's something I hear old school vocal coaches talk about all the time. And while it's not necessarily a bad thing, it might not be right for you. Definitely isn't right for me. And that is breathing really low or breathing into your belly. Something like this, right? Like just focusing on pushing your belly out when you're breathing in. Oh my God, I don't know about you, but man, that feels uncomfortable for me. I feel like a big stretch in my stomach area. I'm barely getting any air in at all, and it just does not feel comfortable at all to me. It can work really well for certain singers, but it can also not work at all for others. What I personally prefer is thinking of a 360 expansion in my ribs up here and not just pushing my stomach out. When I'm doing that 360 expansion, yes, my stomach will come out a little bit too, but I'm not forcing my air all the way down there and just pushing my belly out. That feels a lot more comfortable to me. So with you, play around. Where does it feel the best when you're breathing in? Sometimes even a clavicle breath, meaning a breath up here in higher up in your chest area, can also be helpful. That doesn't mean lift your shoulders and breathe like this. That's not what that means. It just means expanding up here. That can sometimes be very helpful as well. Beyonce is very much a clavicular breathing girly. So, don't knock it till you try it. It can be very helpful. But again, it's going to be different for everybody, where breathing feels the most comfortable and supports them the most for the specific case, like for that specific note or that specific song or that specific exercise. And that's what makes learning how to sing so freaking hard, because it's different for everybody. Not everything works for everyone. And now you're watching a ton of videos, trying to research a lot of stuff, trying to solve your problems, and you're like, I don't know what applies to me and what doesn't. That can be really frustrating and really hard, and you can waste a lot of time doing that. And so if you're like, I just want clarity over what I need, what's right for my voice, and stop wasting time, then please book a one-on-one session with me. I'd love to have a listen to you sing, see exactly what is going on, and workshop a couple things with you to see what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and create a customized plan for your specific voice so that you can stop wasting time doing things that are not right for you and finally do the things that are right for you so you can see progress in your voice quickly. If you'd like to do this intro one-on-one session with me, just click on the link below in the description, pick a day and a time that works best for you, and I will send you a Zoom link to our one-on-one session. But we are not quite done yet with our little mini series here. If you are tired of cracking and you want to start expanding your range and hit high notes with power, then you're definitely not going to want to skip this one. I'll see you there.